Yo, what's up? Assalamualaikum. And tonight we're going to look at LAW088 chapter 1 and chapter 2. So, without further ado, let's go. First chapter of LAW088 is Introduction to International Law. Oh, by the way, LAW088 is a student guide to contemporary global and legal issues. So, for chapter 1, Introduction to International Law. As any chapter starts, we will start with the definition. The general definition is the law of nations and the law among nations. Jeremy Bentham, someone who is prominent in subject law 034, said that international law is a collection of rules governing relations between states. So, there's also another modern interpretation of international law that is a legal system governing relationships between nations, embracing not only the nations but also participants as international organizations and individuals. So, based on Black's Law Dictionary, it states that international law not only governs states or countries, but it also governs the law between people who have international presence or international entities. So, what are the differences between national and also international law? National law deals with the relationship between individuals and state, and it also governs intra-state affairs. For instance, essentially, what national law is, it governs things that happen in a particular country, in a particular state. It is also command and sanction based. That means that there is a command to do or to abstain from certain things, and there are legal consequences, legal sanctions that are brought upon by those who break the commands. It is sourced by legislation. So, for example, in Malaysia, we have the Federal Constitution. For international law, it deals with relations between member states of nations. In other words, it governs interstate affairs, which are affairs between countries and between states. It is also consent-based. So, that means that international law can only be enforced in a particular country if that country agrees to that convention, to that treaty, or to that set of rules and law. It is sourced by treaties and also conventions, which we will look at later. So, there are two divisions in international law. The first is public and second is private international law. We have actually learnt this in Law 033, but I'm going to repeat this since it's in my module. In public international law, governs between states and international organizations or NGOs. It is outcomes of international treaties and customs, and it is enforced by international pressure and fear. International pressure means that when many states perform or carry out the duties that are outlined in the particular treaty or convention, there is an international pressure for other countries to do so, and it is uniform for all states. It is the same for all states. Whereas private international law governs the relationship between companies and individuals of different nationalities. It is formed by the state legislature and it is enforced by the state executive, and private international law differs from state to state. For example, we actually did this in one of our assignments last time. We did a scene in John Wick, in which John Wick, an American, kills an Indonesian on French land, if I'm not mistaken. So, we have to determine which country's legislature should we refer to in the case of clashing nationalities in a particular case. So that is what private international law entails, basically. Okay, there are 5 sources of international law, 3 of which are primary and 2 of which are subsidiary. This is based on Article 38, Clause 1 of the Statute of International Court of Justice, or ICJ. The first 3 primary sources of law are international conventions first, second is international customs, and third is general principles of law. By the way, these 5 sources have their own paragraphs. So, for example, international conventions is in Article 38, Clause 1, Para A, the second is in Para B, third Para C, so on and so forth. The 2 subsidiary sources of international law are judicial decisions in para D, and in para E, teachings of most highly qualified publicists. Salah tulis. Okay, we're gonna look at them one by one. First, A, conventions and treaties. In Article 38, Clause 1, para A, it states that conventions and treaties are agreements established between two or more states or entities recognized by international law. For example, an agreement between Malaysia and Indonesia is considered as a convention or a treaty. It is also known as agreements, pacts, charters, etc. It is consent-based. So, conventions and treaties are consent-based agreements between nations. How does a nation give their consent to a particular treaty or convention? There are three types of consents that a country can give to a particular convention. First is a signature. A signature simply signifies that the country acknowledges the existence of the treaty that is pertained. So, if there is one particular treaty that has been mentioned or that has been discussed, the signature of a country merely signifies the acknowledgement of the existence of the treaty. Secondly is ratification. Ratification is followed up after signature. So after signature, we can follow it up with ratification, which states that the countries agree to follow the treaty, and of course, like I said, it comes after signature. Third is accession. Accession is another way to ratify without giving the country's signature. So that means that if a country wants to take some time to think of whether or not they want to join in the treaty, they can provide their signature first, and then they can ratify after they have made the decision to join that treaty. But for accession, basically they have made up their mind, okay, we're gonna join this convention and we're not gonna think twice about it. That is what accession is. Okay. Secondly is customs. Article 38, Clause 1, para B. Accession is a custom. Customs are general and consistent practice of states. It is established from international general practices. So, what makes the customs of a country become international law? There are four criterions. First is the duration of state practice. Second is uniformity and consistency of the practice worldwide. Third is the generality of the practice, and fourth is opinions of jurists. And that's about it for customs. Third is general principles of law. Principles of law are principles with recognition from all the states and legal systems of the world. It is based on justice and equity, and general principles of law actually work similarly as judicial precedent. Why do I say this? Because general principles of law is established to solve the problem of nullicat. Nullicat is basically when a court refuses to settle a dispute due to the non-existence of a particular law, of a specific law. Why is it same as the judicial precedent? Because if we recall correctly, judicial precedent is used to cater for specific cases and also specific circumstances that are not provided in a particular legislation. That is why I similarize is that a word? Similarize general principles of law with judicial precedent. Okay. And an example of principles of law is actually nemo jude in causa sua, meaning that no judge shall try in his cause. Harap-harapnya betul. Alright. D. Judicial decisions. Okay, based on Article 59 of the Statute of ICJ, it says that judicial decisions are the decisions of the court and have no binding force except between the parties in a particular case. So, contrasting to judicial precedents, judicial decisions in international cases can only be used in the case that is being tried on. It cannot be used in other cases. But in practice, some writers do actually make a reference to the decisions of some cases, some international cases. Okay, and E, writings of publicists. Only by the most highly qualified publicists. That means that only those who receive a high recognition can be used as a reference for international law, and they are only consulted when they are needed. The words are these writings are only consulted when they are needed. Okay, some other sources of international law. There are three. First is General Assembly resolution. So General Assembly resolution is the resolution of General Assemblies that has been agreed upon by all of the state members of the UN. Second is equity. Equity is basically justice. And soft law. Soft law is a body of guiding principles, and it is only persuasive. It is not binding, and it contrasts hard law. Hard law is actually the main 5 sources of law that is in Article 38 of SOICJ, Statute of ICJ. Okay, we're almost done with chapter 1, but we have a long way to go. Banyak gila. Okay, banyak. We're almost done with chapter 1, which closes with monism and dualism. Chapter 1 closes with monism and dualism. We're going to discuss monism first. Monism is the view that national and international law is a part of a single order. That means that in a particular country, if that country practices monism, they practice international and also national law simultaneously, and they view both systems as part of a single order. Okay, rules of international law can be directly applied to the country. That means that if there are resolutions or new international law that has been enforced, that has been enacted, it can be directly applied to the particular country that practices monism. There is also, in cases of conflict between national and international law, if there are two systems of national and also international law that clash, international law will prevail over national law. And one country that uses monism is the United States. Secondly, dualism. Dualism contrasts the view of monism, in which it states that national and international law are two separate independent bodies. So they are not in the same sphere, they are two separate realms lah, separate practices, separate systems of their own. Okay, and the rules of international law must be transferred into national legislation. That means that if there are any General Assembly resolutions, any new enacted international law, it must be transferred, it must be transformed into the national legislation for it to be practiced in a particular country. Actually, fun fact, our country, Malaysia, actually practices dualism, and for international law to be transformed into our legislation, it has to go through the parliament. An example of this transformation is in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. This discusses laws on children lah, senang cerita. So since UNCRC, or the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of a Child, is an international convention, it cannot be directly applied in Malaysia. So what the parliament did was they enacted another act, a new act in 2001, and it is called the Child Act 2001, which we have touched briefly in 033, Law 033. Okay, and in dualism there is no conflict of laws because both laws are applied in their respective courts. So there is no percanggahan lah antara kedua-dua law tersebut. Okay, we're actually done with chapter 1, but chapter 2 is very long, from here and the back here, and I also have additional paper here, so it's quite long, so bear with me. The second chapter in Law 088 is the concept of statehood and sovereignty. What we're going to learn in this chapter is basically what makes a territory become a country, and also what are some of the relations between countries and the examples of it. Okay, let's go. First, we're going to look at international law personalities. International law personalities are international legal personalities is one who is subjected to international law to enjoy rights, duties or powers established in international law. Okay, there are a few types of international legal personality. We're going to look at the first one, which is state actors. State actors are defined as political organizations of society encompassing government institutions. It's quite complicated. So basically, state actors are countries. Basically, state actors ni sama je dengan negara. Okay, the most widely accepted definition of statehood, which is the state of being a country, is actually in the Montevideo Convention 1933. The longer name is the Montevideo Convention on Rights and Duties of a State, but we shorten it to Montevideo Convention 1933. So Article 1 of the Montevideo Convention 1933 outlines that a state must fulfill 4 criteria in order for it to be a state. Those 4 criteria are: first, permanent population; second, defined territory; third, effective government; and fourth, the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Okay, that is the most widely accepted definition of statehood. We're going to look at some theories of statehood. First is the declarative theory of statehood, and also second is the constitutive theory of statehood. Basically, these two theories are opinions on what makes a territory become a state. So there are two views. First, we're going to look at declarative theory. Basically, in a nutshell, declarative theory is the theory that a territory must fulfill the 4 criteria in Article 1 of Montevideo Convention to become a state. So, this means that the state must fulfill the criteria of the Montevideo Convention to become an officially recognized country of international law. Okay, what are the 4 criteria that I have mentioned? Again, I will touch again the 4 criteria and also explain what the 4 criteria mean. First is permanent population. Permanent population is a population connected to a particular territory on a relatively permanent basis. Okay, the keyword to this criteria, this requirement, is permanent. The population must be permanent for it to fulfill the first criteria. Now, the important thing that needs to be said is the population must be permanent, but it disregards the size of the population. So even though I have a small population of maybe only 12 people, if I of course fulfill the other recommendations and the 12 people in my country are permanent residents in that particular country, I still fulfill the first criteria. Secondly, a defined territory. Defined territories are borders separating a state from other states. So, in that territory, the state must have exclusive authority in that territory. Now, similar to permanent population, the size of the state's territory is also immaterial. It is not important. What is important is it has a distinct territory which is marked by borders. Okay. Third is an effective government. An effective government means that the government of that particular territory or that particular state does not require foreign or external control, and the government must express its authority to the connected territory. This can be seen in the Ireland Island case. Let me open up the case because I don't want to get the facts wrong. Okay, I'm just going to read it from my manual. In the Ireland Island case, the main question was the date on which Finland became a state. Finland had been part of the Russian Empire until the Russian Revolution. The parliament declared Finland's independence on the 4th of December 1917. This was recognized by the Soviet government. However, this was opposed by those who rejected the idea of independence. So as a result, violence broke out and the new state was able to maintain order only with the help of Soviet troops. So, the International Committee of Jurists concluded that Finland officially became a state in May 1918 when its public authorities demonstrated sufficient strength to assert control over the territory without relying on foreign troops. So, senang cerita, the government cannot rely on external help for it to become effective, for it to be recognized as effective. So, if a particular country relies on the help of another country, then we can conclude that the country that requires help does not have an effective government. However, there is also an exception to this, which states that a state does not cease to exist when it is temporarily deprived of an effective government. So, a state is typically deprived of an effective government when there is a civil war that breaks out in that country. For example, we can see that currently Myanmar is under martial rule, which is being ruled by the military, and even though that demonstrates that the government is apparently not powerful enough or effective enough to rule over the martial rule, it does not cease to exist as a state. So it maintains the status of being a state even though the country is under martial rule. Okay. Fourthly, the capacity to enter into legal relations. This consists of constitutional competence to do so and the ability to exercise the competence. Basically, the capacity to enter into legal relations must fulfill two criteria. First, the state must have the constitutional competence to enter into legal relations. This means that it must be outlined in the constitution. And secondly, even though the country technically constitutionally enjoys the freedom and the capacity to enter into legal relations, it must also have the technical competency to do so. So even though it is outlined in the constitution, if the country does not have the strength or the power or the capacity to enter into legal relations with other countries, it does not fulfill the fourth criteria. Okay, and we are done with declarative theory of statehood. We're moving on to constitutive theory of statehood. This is opposing the view of the declarative theory, and it says that states need recognition by other states to exist, and only then will it be subject to international law. Basically, for a state to be a body of international law that is subject to international law, it must gain recognition from other recognized states. So, this recognition can be done in two ways. First is express and second is implied. First, express. Express is done in a formal declaration or a statement. So, this means that maybe some countries will write a document or write an official report that says that I recognize so and so country as being a country. Macam tu lah lebih kurang. And implied is when other countries enter into legal relations, enter into agreements or treaties with the country that is being recognized. Senang cerita macam tu lah. Okay, these two theories actually clash with each other. Both have pros and both have cons, and we're going to look at it now. Constitutive versus declarative. So, we're going to look at declarative first. In Article 3 of the Montevideo Convention 1933, it says that political existence of a state is independent of recognition from other states. This means that under the Montevideo Convention, under Article 3, it says that the existence of a state does not require the recognition from other states. So it clashes with the second theory, which is constitutive. And under Article 6 of the Montevideo Convention as well, it says that recognition from other states merely signifies that the recognizing state accepts the personality of the state that is being recognized. So it's merely just the it's symbolic lah, that says that okay, other countries recognize us, and that's about it. That is under the Article 6 of Montevideo Convention. However, there is also a loophole, a problem, I would say, in the Montevideo Convention or in the declarative theory. It says that countries like Transnistria, that is a legit country, they actually fulfill countries like Transnistria, it is not an official country, they actually fulfill all the 4 requirements in Montevideo Convention, but it is not recognized. So just because Transnistria is not being recognized by other countries, it does not adopt the legal personality. So we can see a problem here. Actually, we need constitutive and declarative for it to be a country. But we're going to move on. For constitutive theory, it states that only recognition matters. So you don't have to fulfill all the 4 criteria in Montevideo Convention. If so long as you have recognition from other countries, that is sufficient enough. However, the constitutive theory does not provide an exact number of recognitions that a state needs in order for it to become officially recognized. So there is also a problem there. What if only one recognized state recognizes our country and the other 190 plus countries don't recognize us? So does that mean that we are also a country? So dia macam ada pros and cons lah untuk kedua-dua teori ni. And the best actually is to have both of these theories. Okay, there is actually an example in the constitutive theory. Salah. Kita akan move on. We're also gonna look at the curative effect of recognition. Curative effect of recognition is when recognition can make up for the failure for certain states to fulfill the criteria in the Montevideo Convention. For example, the Vatican City. We know that the Vatican City is a place for Christians to go for pilgrimage. Betul? Oh, Dylan tak ada apa? If I know correctly lah, the Vatican City is the pilgrimage center for Christians, and it is only comprised of 800 it is comprised of a population of 800 people, and the population in the Vatican City are mostly nomads, which is they are not self-sustaining. It is not permanent lah senang cerita. But because the Vatican City receives recognition from other states, it is also considered a state. So you can see there is a loophole in these 2 theories that have been discussed. That is why I say that the best thing to do as a state is to have both. You must fulfill all 4 criteria, and you must also have an additional criteria, which is recognition from other states. Okay, we're gonna move on with the concept of state sovereignty. Okay, state sovereignty is basically telling us about independence. So independence includes 2 things: the rights to govern within its own territory and without interference from other states. So in order for it to be independent, the government must have rights to govern its own territory, and the government must also require no interference from other states. Okay, and it also states that no country is a subordinate to another. So all countries are independent, sovereign from each other. So actually, the concept of state sovereignty actually grants and limits powers. It grants powers as in it grants the governments full authority to govern their own countries, but also limits the power as to say that the government cannot interfere in other countries punya business. So kalau ada apa-apa foreign policy that is made by other countries, the country that made the policy has the sovereignty to enact that policy. We cannot interfere because we have our own sovereignty, they have their own sovereignty. Betul. Macam kata kubur masing-masing lah senang cerita macam tu. Okay, okay, there are 4 concepts of sovereignty. First is authority. The authority basically means the right to command and the right to be obeyed. This is for the government. Second is legitimacy. Legitimacy means that the holder of the sovereignty gets the authority from mutually agreed source. So a typical mutually agreed source is the constitution lah. Third is supremacy. Supremacy means that state exercises the highest supreme authority over all persons in and their associates within national territory. So they are supreme lah, they are the highest in their territory. And fourth is territoriality. It is the subordination of all individuals located within boundaries of the state to the supreme government. Okay, that was the concept of sovereignty. We're moving on to the types of sovereignty. There are two types, de jure and de facto. I'm sure most of you have heard of de facto before, so we're going to look at both. First, de jure is the legal right to exercise power, and it is founded in law. So de jure basically means that the constitutional rights of someone to have power in a particular country. So for example, dekat Malaysia, Prime Minister constitutionally enjoys the right and the power to rule over the Federation of Malaya. However, de facto is the ability to exercise it. Individuals or groups with power. So sebenarnya senang cerita, in Malaysia, the de jure sovereignty that the de jure in Malaysia is the YDPA, because he is the highest authority in our country's government. But the de facto that actually rules the government or rules the country is the Prime Minister, because he carries out the work. He is the real executive for the country of Malaysia. Macam tu lah. So sebenarnya macam macam mana nak cakap, de jure ni adalah orang yang secara konstitusionalnya dia adalah orang yang pegang kuasa, tapi de facto ni adalah orang yang actually memerintah kawasan tersebut. Macam tu. Okay. So de jure sovereignty can also be de facto, which means that the person who constitutionally owns the rights and the powers to rule over a particular country can be the de facto ruler of the country, but it is not necessarily vice versa. Okay, and de jure is the strong de jure ke? I think I miswrote this. Okay, I miswrote this, but it states in my manual that de facto is the strongest active force of a state, because de facto sovereignty is the actual sovereignty that is being practiced, not de jure. Okay. Now we're moving on to non-state actors. All that yapping and daripada awal chapter 2 ni adalah for state actors. Now we're going to look at non-state actors. Non-state actors are entities not run by governments but play a role in international affairs. They are individuals or organizations that have powerful economy, political or social power, can influence at a national or international level, but they do not belong or associate with any country or government. So senang cerita, non-state actors ni adalah any person or any organisation that has international presence but is not part or is not considered a country. There are 5 types of non-state actors. First is sub-state actors, second NGO, third IGO, intergovernmental organizations, 4 transnational actors, and 5th violent state actors. We're going to look at all 5 tonight. Banyak lagi, so bear with me. Okay, first, sub-state actors. Sub-state actors are actually government-linked companies. There are individuals with similar interests, not beyond the state, but the interests can affect the state's foreign policy. For example, the Malaysian automobile industry. Actually, the automobile industry in Malaysia imposes a higher tax for cars that are imported from other countries. So, they do this to encourage the people in Malaysia to buy national cars, national car brands macam Proton ataupun Perodua. So to do this, they actually impose a higher tax for imported automobiles lah senang cerita. That is what sub-state actors are. It is government-linked companies that have the same interests. They work inside the borders of a state, but they can affect the state's foreign policy. Okay. Second, non-governmental organizations, NGOs. We have heard about NGOs a lot before studying this thing, so I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with the concept of NGOs. It is private international actors whose members are not states, but they are volunteers from populations of 2 or more states who form organizations to promote their shared interests to influence governmental policies and IGOs. These NGOs are formed due to 3 main reasons. First is the government roles increase. Second is the pressure from governmental policies, and the third is the government does not respond to the people's needs. That is the basic reason, the 3 root reasons why NGOs are formed. For example, it is you can see in Amnesty International, which deals with human rights, and WWF, Worldwide Fund for Nature, kalau tak silap, Worldwide Fund for Nature. Yes, Worldwide Fund for Nature. So these are types of NGOs. Again, I will define it again. There are private international actors that are not states. It is comprised of people who are from 2 or more countries. That's where they are non-governmental organizations, and that's where they get their international presence, because they are formed from people with 2 or more nationalities, and they form the organization to promote their shared interests to influence governmental policies and IGOs. Okay, now we're moving on to IGOs. IGOs are intergovernmental organizations. It consists of members from 3 or more nation states. It is created to solve common problems. It can determine global agenda. It can also determine global agenda. So, IGOs ni, even though we have not heard of the term IGO, or we have rarely heard of the term IGO, we are actually familiar with them, because some types of NGOs are global and regional. First, global IGO, organizations with universal or near universal membership. So we are quite familiar because one of the global IGOs is UN, WTO, World Trade Organization, and IMF. IMF is the International Monetary Fund. Secondly is regional IGOs. It is a subset of states as members based on particular interest or region. So it is a coalition of different countries, different nations that form these IGOs. For example, ASEAN and also EU. Okay, what are the few reasons for IGO formations? There are 2. First is agenda setting. So since this is especially for regional IGOs, since these regional IGOs come in the same area in the globe, since these regional IGOs such as ASEAN and EU, they are located quite near to each other, they can set an agenda for the whole bukan province tau, macam mana nak cakap, agenda setting ni basically bila kita ada satu coalition of governments, we would set our agenda or set our goals to achieve a mutual goal for each of these countries, macam tu. And secondly is information gathering, nak dapatkan demographics and all that lah. Okay, few examples of IGOs. First is UN. UN is for peacekeeping to develop relations, and it is also the center of global harmony. Second, the World Trade Organization, WTO, they monitor agricultural and commodity trading, and they also manage disputes on trades. Third is ASEAN. They promote regional economic, social and cultural cooperation. And NATO, last but not least, NATO, which is a collective defense alliance. Okay, we are done with 3 of 5, kan, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we are done with 3 out of the 5 non-state actors. Betul kan, 5? 3. Okay, aku tak sure. Tapi kita dah done lah. Dah majority dah siap. Fourth or next is the transnational actor. Transnational actors function below state level, but they function across state borders. So agak confusing kan. Dia senang cerita adalah organisations yang akan function dalam satu negara, tapi diorang punya operation tu menjangkaui negara tersebut. Okay, so there are two types of transnational actors, TNC and MNC. TNC stands for transnational corporations, and they operate based on the local market, the market of a specific country. They have no centralized HQ. An example of TNC is McDonald's. Okay, senang cerita nak explain pasal McDonald's ni. McDonald's punya menu contohnya macam burger nasi lemak, lepas tu menu-menu yang eksklusif untuk Malaysia kan. Contoh kalau nak raya mesti keluar ayam rendang, kalau nak macam tu lah, benda-benda macam tu kan. This menu-menu ni akan hanya ditemui dekat Malaysia. Perasan tak? Sebab kalau kita pergi ke negara lain, contoh kita pergi negara Jepun kan, ada burger teriyaki. Burger teriyaki tu bukan limited menu, dia akan sentiasa ada. Tapi dia ada dekat Jepun je. Kat Malaysia tak ada. Kalau ada pun dia datang limited time, ataupun dia takkan datang terus. Tapi negara kita pula ada burger nasi lemak, something like that. Itu adalah types of transnational corporation, sebab they function based on the market of that country. Sebab dia tahu orang kita makan nasi lemak, so dia buatlah burger nasi lemak tu macam tu. Okay, next is multinational corporations, MNC. They have a centralized HQ. So ini yang membezakan antara TNC and MNC. MNCs have centralized HQ and they operate extensively in other states. For example, Apple, the brand Apple, and also some industries such as the automotive, oil, and also electronic industries. Okay, MNCs are usually in the G7 states. Now, the G7 states are an informal, I wrote it somewhere here. Okay, the G7 states are an informal grouping of the world's most powerful economies. So, the G7 states comprise of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. So that is the definition and the membership of G7 states. Again, this is an informal collection here. This is not formal. Okay. So MNCs, they are usually motivated by profit maximization, and they actually are beneficial as they open job opportunities. Okay. Now we're going to violent non-state actors. First, sorry, I had to cut the video sebab my nose is so itchy. Saya tak tahu kenapa kat sini. Like daripada awal video dia gatal. So tak apa, we're moving on to violent non-state actors. Violent non-state actors, there are 3. Basically violent non-state actors ni adalah non-state actors but they are violent. So the first type of non-state actors is insurgents. Insurgents are people born in the wombs of a state, so they can come from impoverished areas and all that. They assert international dominance by force, so they use force to assert their dominance in international relations and also international affairs. Secondly, there are terrorists and political groups. Terrorists carry certain ideologies and they operate the same as NGOs. So how these terrorists communicate with the world is they communicate through violent planned attacks. For example, the 9/11 attack by the Al-Qaeda on the World Trade Center. Okay, that is terrorists. Third is international criminal groups. So, the difference between terrorists and also international criminal groups is, while terrorists carry certain ideologies, international criminal groups do not carry these ideologies. They are illegitimate transnational actors and they do not carry ideologies, and most of these international criminal groups have great financial resources and operate secretly. An example is the Yakuza and the Mafia in Italy and the Hong Kong triads in Hong Kong. Okay, we're done with apa saya pun dah lupa dah. We're done with non-state actors. Now, we're moving on to some of the major international organizations. We're going to look at three if I'm not mistaken. First is UN, second is ASEAN, and third is the EU, the European Union. First, United Nations. It is founded and established in 1945 and it is joined by 51 countries. At the time of the establishment, its membership consists of 51 countries. A short history lesson on the establishment of the UN. On the 1st of January 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt coined the name UN in the United Nations declarations to fight the Axis power. So if we remember, in 1942, in 1942, World War II was going on. So the president at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, he wanted to fight the Axis power. I can't remember what it comprised of, but to fight the Axis power, Franklin D. Roosevelt formed or coined the name United Nations. So in 1945, after the end of World War II, 50 countries met in San Francisco, California to draw the UN Charter. Charters are basically legislations lah. And on the 26th of June 1945, the charter was signed. There is actually a video on YouTube. I can't remember what the name is, but we watched it during the lecture. It's quite fascinating. It shows the leaders of countries signing the UN Charter. You can watch it. And on the 24th of October 1945, the UN officially came into force. So the UN came into force lah on the 24th of October 1945. So, what are the purposes of the UN, you might think? Well, it is in Article 1 of the United Nations Charter. First, for global peacekeeping, quite self-explanatory. Secondly, is to develop friendly relations among nations, among the state members. Third is to solve global issues, for example, hunger and also environmental issues. And fourth is the fourth purpose of the UN Charter is the fourth purpose of the UN, as established in Article 1 of the UN Charter, is the center of harmonizing, global harmonizing. Okay, we're going to look at the organizational structure of the UN. Kata betul lah. There are aku tak tahu kenapa dia gatal gila. Serius tak itu. Sebab usually I'll apply some ointment on my forehead sebab ada jerawat. Lepas tu tiba dia gatal, tak tahu kenapa. Okay, the organizational structure of the UN. The UN is comprised of 6 main organs. We're going to look at all 6 tonight. So, first is UNGA, or United Nations General Assembly. It is comprised of all the UN members, and all of each of the members have one vote. So for voting, all of the UN members have one vote lah. Their votes count as one macam tu. So there are 193 members of the UNGA. So ni adalah semua all these 193 countries are the countries that are recognized and also have international presence. Sekejap. Okay, harap-harap tak kata lah. Okay, the UNGA is used to discuss peace and security, some budgetary concerns and other matters related to international affairs. So, to pass legislation in the UN, there must be a voting, and the voting must be by 2/3 majority for the legislation to be passed. So, there are 2 types of sessions in the UN. First is an annual session, which happens yearly, and secondly is a special session, and this session is requested by the Security Council. The Security Council is another organ of the UN, and the special session is held by the Secretary General, which is the head secretary of the secretariat body in the UN. Again, we're gonna look at these two separate bodies, the SC, the Security Council, and the Secretariat later. And we're moving on to the second main organ of the UN, which is the UNSC, UN Security Council. The UN Security Council is used to maintain international peace and security. As the name suggests, it is a security council, so of course it will used to promote international peace and security. Secondly, the UN Security Council can convene at any time. This council actually holds the biggest power among all 6 of the main UN organs. So the UNSC can intervene at any time they want to macam maintain peace lah, sudah cerita. And like I said, the Security Council is the most most powerful UN organ. Some of the roles of the UNSC is to recommend peaceful settlements, take some enforcement actions, and elect the International Court of Justice judges alongside with UNGA, so they work collaboratively. Fourth, to recommend admission of new members. So they are the ones who recommend the admission of new state members into the UN. So the UNSC comprises of 15 members, and the decisions require 9 votes for it to be carried out. The membership of the UNSC is divided into 2. First is permanent membership. So the permanent membership is held by the five nations who hold veto power, which is China, France, Russia, United States, and the United Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken. Sekejap, let me check. Yep. So the 5 states who hold permanent membership are the CFRUK, China, France, Russian Federation, United Kingdom, and also the United States. Okay, and the others have membership on 2-year terms, so they are members for 2 years. And a decision cannot be made if there is a no vote, obviously lah. Okay, third main body of the UN, main organ of the UN, is ECOSOC. ECOSOC is Economic and Social Council. So the Economic and Social Council, their role is to debate socio-economical issues and coordinates socio-economy. The ECOSOC is also a central forum for international socio-economic discussions, and it's comprised of 54 members elected by the UNGA, and the membership is on 3-year terms. So 3 tahun lah. Fourth, Trusteeship Council. The Trusteeship Council is established to supervise trust territories. So trust territories are actually countries that are preparing for their own independence. So actually, the Trusteeship Council last operated in 1994. It operated on the country of Palau, and since then it has not seen any operation. However, it is yet to be formally eliminated from the UN. So as of now, the Trusteeship Council has tak buat apa-apa lah untuk sekarang. Fifth, the most infamous lah, especially lately, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. So the International Court of Justice is the UN's main judicial organ, and it is seated by 15 judges of 9-year terms. So all 15 judges are elected for a term of 9 years, and it is used to solve legal disputes between states submitted by the state itself. So we all remember, it is like yesterday, kita semua ingat kes antara South Africa and also Israel last year, in which South Africa has brought a claim to the ICJ on the war crimes that has been done by Israel. So that is where the ICJ is doing its job to solve legal disputes between state. And if you remember, the dispute is brought by the state itself, which is South Africa. They represent Palestine. Tak sure yang mana. Okay. The ICJ also advises on legal questions, and an example of the ICJ being used is in the case of Pulau Batu Putih, which is a dispute between the Malaysian and also the Singaporean government to determine whether or not Pulau Batu Putih, among other islands, who are under the ownership of the Malaysian government or the Singaporean government, if I remember correctly lah. Okay, the last main organ of the UN, the Secretariat. The Secretariat carries out the substantive and also the administrative work of the UN. A few roles of the Secretariat: first is to gather background info on current issues. They also help carry out other organs' decisions. So whatever other organs' decisions that have been made, the Secretariat will help to carry out these resolutions and also these decisions. Third is to organize international conferences. Fourth is to translate speeches and also distribute documents among the leaders, the world leaders. And fifth is PR work. They are the ones who inform the general public of the developments and also the activities carried out by UN. So most probably they are the ones who hold the accounts for the Instagram accounts for the UN, also the TikTok accounts and all that, because they are tasked with informing the public of what the UN does day to day. Okay. Okay. In Secretariat, if you remember correctly, I mentioned Secretary General. Secretary General is appointed by the UN General Assembly and is recommended by the UN Security Council. And the Secretary General is appointed for a term of 5 years. So 5-year terms lah. One of few roles of the Secretary General, it's to bring peace threats to the Security Council for it to be discussed there, to propose discussions of issues to other organs, and act as a referee. Dia referee ni macam judge dalam adversarial system macam tu. Same role. Okay. A few challenges of the UN. First is international peacekeeping. So we can see the first challenge of UN, which is international peacekeeping, actually in Malbat, Misi Bakara. That is one of the challenges of UN, because it demonstrates perfectly lah one of the things that the UN deals with. Secondly is human rights protection. Third is international disputes. Fourth is removing poverty. Okay, those are some of the challenges of the UN. Some of the criticisms of UN, there are 4. Outdated structure. First is outdated structure because the UN is established in 1945, a very long time ago. So the structure is maintained till today, which makes it outdated. Second and third is actually on the powers of the Security Council. The Security Council holds veto power and too much power, because if you remember correctly, the decisions of the Security Council must be followed by the other organs. So the Security Council's decisions are very much binding lah to other organizations. Okay, and that leads to its effectiveness, because what the Security Council say goes. So what if they say this, do this. If they say that, do that. So where is the effectiveness of the UN? Macam itulah. Okay, in UN there is actually a term called SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, and it is popularized in 1987 in the report of the UNCED, UN Council of the UN Commission on Environment and Development, with 17 goals. And senang cerita, dia adalah a few goals that the UN hopes to reach lah, macam tu. Okay, the dimensions of a sustainable development, there are 3. economic development, social inclusion, and also environmental sustainability. So the 17 goals in the SDG actually pave a way to the three dimensions of sustainable development. Macam itulah. They have three aims. Let's say macam tu. Okay. And the Brundtland Commission. Sekejap. Okay, Brundtland Commission, they actually define SDG as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Macam tu. Hei, kata dia, ya Allah. Tak tahulah kenapa, sumpah. I don't know. Okay, we're moving on to ASEAN. Okay, this is a regional IGO. Regional IGO. First, ASEAN. It is founded on the 8th of August 1967 in Bangkok, Thailand. It is comprised of 10 members, of which 5 members are the founding members of ASEAN, which are Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. So, the other members of the ASEAN which joined later, the other members are Brunei, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, and also Cambodia. So the ASEAN Charter was formed in Jakarta on the 15th of August 2005. So a few objectives of ASEAN. First is to accelerate socio-economic growth. Second is to promote regional stability and growth. Third, to promote active collaboration on shared interests. Fourth, to promote a more effective utilization of agriculture and industries. So, the ASEAN leaders meet at an ASEAN summit yearly lah. Sistem macam tu. Okay, so itu saja for ASEAN. ASEAN is very short and simple. So, we're finally moving on to the last subtopic. Second last subtopic, but the last IGO, which is EU. Okay, fun fact, for intergovernmental organizations, it is also known as a supranational organization. So there are two terms lah for the same meaning. Okay, EU, a little bit history about the EU. It is originally named the EEC, which is the European Economic Council, if I'm not mistaken. Wait, let me see. Sorry, it's the European Economic Community. So, the EU was originally named the EEC, and it was established in 1958. And as the name suggests, the EEC was to foster economic cooperation. So, the EU that we know today was not the EU that was originally in mind by the leaders when it was first formed, because the EU today governs a lot of things, defense and also trading, economy, politics. But when it was formed in 1958, the goal was to merely foster economic cooperation. So there was only one goal in mind, which is the economic cooperation lah. The founding countries of the EEC was Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Okay, the EEC transformed into the EU, and the EU encompasses various policies beyond trades, and it consists of a membership of 28 countries. And fun fact, the EU is the largest trading bloc globally, so it is the biggest trading bloc lah semester. Okay, so the goal of the EEC was to promote economic cooperation, but the EU now has 6 main goals. First is to promote justice, second to offer freedom, third for sustainable development, fourth to combat discrimination, fifth to promote technological progress, and sixth establish monetary union. Okay, we're done with the first piece of paper. Now we're gonna look at my second piece of paper, which is this one. Tapi singkat sajalah, so last subtopic. Okay, last subtopic for chapter 2 of LAW088. Globalization. Globalization's definition is when countries are interdependent on each other. It is the process of interaction and integration among different nations and has various effects geographically, politically, and socio-economically. And the concept of globalization is not a new concept, because in the years 850 to 500 BC, if I'm not mistaken, the use of the Silk Road was very prominently used widely used by traders across the globe, and also traders across the globe. So senang cerita, globalization ni is when countries depend on each other on certain affairs. And I don't think there's a world where globalization does not exist, because in a way countries do depend on each other to form certain treaties to help certain things in their administration. Okay, there are three main types of globalization. First is political. Political globalization is the growth of international organizations composed of states as well. Hi everyone, the video cut out sebab storage saya habis. Tapi tak apa, kita akan teruskan je. I'm gonna repeat the political globalization punya part. So, political globalization is the growth of international organizations composed of states as well as the spread of non-state actors. Political globalization is the globalization of policies, and it's a globalized effort to remove international and to resolve international conflicts. So, second type of globalization is economic globalization. It is the intercontinental exchange of products, services, and labor. So, internationally, when the trade increases, the international trade increases, there is a higher competition between organizations globally, and it affects the price, in which the price goes down, because bila competition dah tinggi and then you want to mark up your price again, memang taklah kau nak dapat apa-apa customer. So macam tu lah. That is tied to economic globalization. Third is cultural globalization. This is the most familiar lah with us, which is the spread of one's culture against national borders, and it encompasses many things such as sports, music, food, etc. So macam kat kedai western kedai western is the globalization culturally, because they use macam western punya menu tapi dekat Malaysia macam tu. Okay, there are a few causes of globalization. First is technological development, because technology is always advancing, so there is an incentive for globalization to occur. Second is financial market expansion, because the borders now more than ever have been so low for international trades, so there is that is a cause of globalization. Third is the innate human desire to explore, so as we explore we globalize with the world. Fourth is the global communication, social media and all that, so it's self-explanatory. Fifth is the TNC and MNC growth. Okay, those are the 5 causes of globalization. Some pros and cons of globalization. We'll start with the pros. First, it encourages global connectivity. Second is it opens employment opportunities, because the markets are bigger, so the employment opportunities are also bigger. For example, macam Google has an employment has a working force of people from multiple countries, multiple nationalities, and that is one of the pros of globalization. Third is the reduced possibility of warfare, because countries would want to maintain their peace with other countries, so that in future cases, if they maintain their peace, they avoid the possibility of warfare, they can interact and also trade with the other countries better more efficient. Fourth is it promotes economic well-being, because we can trade with a wider range of consumers. And fifth, it encourages sharing of technology and knowledge. However, there are few cons of globalization. First is unemployment and less work security. So, this is seen macam contohnya, if I open a factory in the US, the labor cost in US is so high, and is especially high as compared to if I open a factory in China, because China's labor cost is quite low compared to the US. So when I opened the factory in US and I realized that I can actually opening a factory in China actually costs less than opening one in US. So I closed the one in US, I opened the one in China. So the workers that work in my US factory have no job security because they lose their job there, and it opens another job. Macam mana nak cakap? It opens employment opportunities for China macam tu. So even though orang kat China ni dia untung sebab dapat kerja, but the people in US actually lose their job. So that is the where unemployment and less work security comes from. Okay, second is religions and cultures clash, because they sometimes they do not go hand in hand, so they sometimes clash with each other. Third is environmental issues. This is pertaining to pollution and all that. Fourth is the blurring of internal and external affairs of countries, because they are so integrated into each other, they are so assimilated to each other that sometimes we cannot distinguish between internal and also external affairs. And fifth is industrial piracy. So ni basically industrial piracy is the production of apa tu nama dia, fake items lah, fake luxury brands, fake items, because they can look at the brands and they can identify, oh, I can do this for a much lower cost, and they actually do it. So that is one of the cons for globalization. And that's about it. So I think it's over 1 hour long and banyak gila cut. Sorry, memang gatal and I don't know why, but that is it, and that's about it. See ya.